On today's cast, Apple is set to redefine reality and fans rejoice, except for the ones who are queasy as fuck. Then Section 230 is saved by the Supreme Court, or is it maybe still on the chopping block? And TikTok creators take on Montana, a battle over bits and dollars. I'm Bob Garfield, bombastic sidekick, here with El Jefe Steve Rosenbaum. And from various points on the Eastern Seaboard, this is Future Forward. Hey, Steve, what you got?
Oh, it's that weird lull pre-summer moment where everybody is scrambling for their beach house or their boat or their dock or their airplane or their graduation as fast as they can. And there is the little matter of the fact that it's possible that the U.S. economy will not be able to pay its bills in 48 hours. But other than that, summertime. What's not to love?
Well, the living is easy.
Let
me do this. Living is easy. The first subject today that you've given us is about Apple's new VR headset, which you wonder if it could be the thing with two capital T's, which amuses me. Because from my perspective, you're kind of like Linus in the pumpkin patch, waiting for the great pumpkin year after year after year, and he never quite arrives. And every Halloween you're left disappointed. So is the great pumpkin coming?
So I'm going to show you two bits of evidence. First, I'm holding up for our podcast listeners this rather unusual round circular thing with the clicky thing, and then I'm going to hold up my treasured headgear. So this is the Meta Oculus, which literally has so much dust on it. I'm blowing it off.
Because it's been in the back of the closet with your Google Glass and the other gadgets that you've accumulated over the last 15 years.
I think I have to take a picture of these and Google Glass for the graphic for this podcast. Yes, in fact, the thing that Oculus had going for it, for those of you who did not spring for it, was really, really fucking cheap. It's $199. The weird thing, I was thinking about the pod this morning is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I just interrupt? Because this is not my province. But the other thing about it was the experience is pretty phenomenal. I mean, to do virtual reality is to be blown away by virtual reality. Now, that doesn't mean it's practicable or a business or a viable consumer product, but it's quite a thing to experience. So it had that going for it too.
Maybe I tried a couple of apps. I wasn't able to get them installed properly. It was frustrating. But here's the weird thing. Meta knows I own their headgear. Like, I'm on their mailing list. They have communicated with me, hey, there's a new app you should try, a total of 0 times. So like consumer marketing 101, I'm a customer. Yeah. I'm not yet using the device. You know this because you're seeing me not log in. You have data that says, oh, wait, we got $200 of his money. It probably cost them $400 to make the damn thing. And they're making no attempt to get me to use it. So,
yeah. And by the way, the reason they sold the things as a loss leader to begin with was to acquire email addresses for the lifetime customer value that suggests. So it does seem quite remarkable that they've just
given up.
Yeah, I guess that's the right word.
So as we're talking, I found the clip, and for the film, the Ready Player One, which is the kind of best example of what VR might be. And by the way, surprise, I don't know if you remember. Do you remember who the director of Ready Player One was?
Oh, I have absolutely no idea.
Steven Spielberg.
Oh, I heard it. I heard about that guy.
Yeah. And if you want like a kind of a futuristic view of what VR, where VR might take society in all of its both excitement and horribleness. A rewatch of at least the trailer, we'll put it in the show notes, of Ready Player One, is worthwhile. If for no other reason that the glasses that Apple is going to release on June 5th look almost like exactly the headgear from the movie. Mm-hmm. Really, actually,
kind of shocking, like skier's goggle-ish. Yeah.
So let's just talk about the upcoming Worldwide Developer Conference on June 5th.
Hold a second.
Yeah.
Can we put this in the form of a question?
Yeah.
Do you know anything about the upcoming Worldwide Developers Conference that begins on June 5th?
Only that they're releasing the headgear on that day. And I don't know what that means in terms of Apple, phenomenon. Does it mean that they're going to, hand them out to journalists? It would seem so. I mean, maybe they're not giving them away, but they're probably going to have those little booths set up where everyone can try them. The articles, all the press has been pretty all over the place, is the best way. I mean, everyone, the business press is critical, suspicious that this may be Tim Cook's failed white whale disaster. And the handful of people who've actually used them have raved about them.
Mm-hmm. And, sometimes these big debuts at these Apple dog and pony shows, sometimes they are MacBook Pro or the iPhone or the iPod, and sometimes they're Newton. And it's kind of like, how much skepticism do you enter with, and how prepared are you to be wowed? And the number of Newtons over the last 10 years is kind of piling up. There's been a bunch of fanfare about hardware that has not really lived up to the hype. So I know I'm curious.
And then there's the famous Apple Watch release, which a bunch of smart people were kind of like, yeah, I don't know, really, do we really need another device? Do I want my, and some of the people who are now thinking about, the headset have talked about not being excited about the Apple Watch, which is now, an enormous business, enormously profitable, highly successful. I do not own an Apple Watch.
I do. I don't use it because it's too much of a pain in the ass to keep recharged.
Interesting. So why did you buy it?
It was a gift. And I thought it was just the thing because, as you know, Steve, I'm the oldest living American, and I'm worried about, the I've fallen and I can't get up scenario. And I thought, since I can't keep track of my iPhone, it would be nice to have the watch with me at all times so I can call the paramedics or whatever. And but the nightly having to plug it in and I just fuck it. A watch is supposed to be something you put on and forget about, and that isn't.
So now I know what to get you for your birthday, because they have these devices you set by the side of the bed. The watch actually doesn't need to be plugged in. It has a charging device on the back of it, so you just hang it on this little hook, and it charges overnight, and then you put it on in the morning. Mm-hmm. No, I agree. The plugging and unplugging is a pain in the ass. So here's the. I could take either side of this debate, but I know the one that I'm leaning toward. I think they've priced it to be enormously expensive for a reason. Most of the buyers of a $3,000 device are going to be early adopters who are never going to say a bad thing about it because it makes them look like a schmuck if they're wrong, or developers. And the one thing that I think is worth remembering, the reason why Oculus failed is because the software is fucking terrible. It's fucking terrible. It's a terrible experience. It doesn't teach you how to use it. It doesn't get better. It doesn't improve itself. It's just fucking terrible. And if you think about the kind of draconian way that Apple manages, the App Store, having produced an app in my career, I can tell you that you're not allowed to say this out loud, but I will break the rules. I mean, the torture that it takes to get an app through the approval process at the App Store is amazing and hard. And the reason why every app has the same shape, bevel, and looks the same and feels the same is because Apple requires excellence at a level that no one else does. Certainly not Android. Presumably, Apple is torturing developers of the Reality headset with the same meticulous misery. Which is a good phrase. I should jot that one down. And so if they deliver even a handful of spectacular software experiences in partners with their software development partners, that will make the device. That will be my guess. And so I think it will be a slow build. I think it will sell fine. They'll manufacture very few of them in year one. They'll sell them out. There'll be a line to get them. I will buy one, I think, even though it's a lot of fucking money, because I want to be able to share it with you, our loyal listeners. Does that make it a tax write-off? I think it does. But I do have a bone to pick with Apple about this device. And it's not a little one. And so shall I just go ahead and pick at this potential bone?
Pick.
I hate the name. And it makes me kind of angry.
Angry?
Yeah.
Is it because why would they name something reality in the post-reality age? Is it that it doesn't really describe any of the utility or the wonder? Is it that it's the opposite of what it purports to deliver? What, angry?
So, I think that when we write the history of media's damage on the planet, we could make a pretty good argument that reality TV, taking things that were fiction, claiming they were fact, scripting them, casting them, manipulating them, and then convincing the audience that somehow these people magically found themselves on an island in bikinis without a sunburn or sunscreen, and then all ended up sleeping together and fighting. We'll go down. Reality TV is an enormously damaging form factor. And so,
I might argue with you, but in fact, it has come to be manifested in our daily politics, and you can see the damage every day on the front of the New York Times, where objective truth seems to have ceased to exist. So, but for you to be properly aggrieved here, you have to think that people will make that association between reality, the goggles, and reality, the contrived television programming. Do you think anybody's going to make that leap?
No, I don't think so at all. I think it's the opposite of that. I think it's so I get it, right? You're in a marketing meeting and there's a list of 400 names on the wall, and some of them you can actually acquire, and some of them you're going to pay a little money for, and some of them you're going to have to open up the truck and buy them from an owner who knows that you're Apple and that you're going to pay a bill. And so you go through this process of, we could call it XVR, we could call it iReal, we could call it IV. IV is probably a bad name. Well, it's funny. And you settle on reality as a brand you can buy, a name you can own. It's not blank, so it seems like a new thing, blah, blah, blah. I get I could be in the room and end up at reality and see how they got here, except that it is unreality, it's ultra reality, it's non-reality. And so the fact that they're willing, for the purposes of marketing, to say, well, everyone knows when we say reality, we don't mean it's real. But if you rewatch, Ready Player One, in which society has further melted into this stack of mobile homes on essentially on scaffolding, and then you put on these magical headsets and get to play in a world that seems more exciting and whatever. I'm I'm angry at the word reality. But having said that, I pulled up, for those of you who are watching this on video, a picture of the headsets, which do look kind of gorgeous in a weird kind of way.
Yeah,
So
I'm going to stay with the ski goggles analogy, but it also looks like a curvature of the iPhone. So almost like it's a disorder. But listen, we've expended a whole lot of time on the reality headset, so I think we need to proceed.
all right, so let's move to the TikTok users in Montana. So the state of Montana has outlawed TikTok, which is on its face pretty just ridiculously stupid, in part because they have no ability to control such things. And there's no magical way that you can build a border for the internets and say, oh, how would that work in real life? I'm in Montana where TikTok is banned, but I cross the border and it magically appears on my iPhone. It's got some great big geo fence around the state that keeps out digital content. I mean, so that's stupid. And Kara Swisher on her and Prof G's podcast this week, Scott Galloway essentially just said, this is the stupidest thing known to man. There's no legal precedent for it. They have no control over what legal zeros and ones cross over a border. That being said, I do love that the TikTok users are suing the state because
I'm sorry. May I just interrupt? Yes. Do you want to say the cuz? Because I have a trenchant thought about this.
Go ahead. Go.
They're suing the state. The state has zero chance of prevailing. Zero, because just to begin with, states are not permitted constitutionally to try to govern interstate commerce. That is strictly a federal province, and they have they just don't have standing to do so. Among other also many constitutional issues, such as the First Amendment, that are at work here. So this is not really legislation. It's just it's a culture wars thing. It's a political thing to once again, so that Governor Greg Gianforte and the Republican legislature can, strike another blow for their version of freedom. And clearly the First Amendment implications are equally disqualifying for this thing. You just can't say, no, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to speak to the people of Montana because you reside in China. That's not a thing. However, the one thing I like about not this legislation, but the notion of this legislation is not about the data that may or may not go to China and damage our national security and our personal American privacy, but at least it recognizes that TikTok leaves lasting damage to the psyches of a generation. And this is the social media problem that is not addressed by issues like Section 230. It's not addressed by legislation banning downloads, but it is a real problem, and for which the solution is not clear. But rather than try to scare us with bogeymen about Chinese intelligence and their access to data, forgetting, by the way, that we seem to not care about Facebook's access to our data and Insta's and all these other corrosive platforms to the fabric of American society. This shit takes a toll on young people. And if this somehow creates the political will to deal with that fundamental problem of the mental health of a society, I hope it does. I hope this is the beginning, not once this is struck down, which it will be, at the absolute first level of federal court. I hope it starts a conversation that has some sort of satisfying conclusion.
So I'm going to pick that apart a little bit and just go back to something you said as part of your laundry list of, because I don't understand it. So let's talk about Section 230 just for a second. Right now, you have a teenage daughter. Your daughter sees things on Insta. Terrible things happen. You've got the Frances Haugen leaked material that says that Facebook knows that your daughter's seeing this horrible stuff and that in fact we're promoting it to her. You call a lawyer and say, I would like to sue. And they say, I'm sorry, but there's this law that gives these platforms, it's a 26-year-old law buried in the Communications Decency Act from 26 years ago. But as a result, your daughter's harms have no place in court. Why is the abolishment of Section 230 not as good an entry point for you, dad of teenage daughter, to have redress as any other? Why is that not the solution?
Well, this was going to be the third section of our episode today. Well, it's because the Supreme Court just gave 230 further safe haven by denying plaintiffs who claim that Section 230 amounted to aiding and abetting and all sorts of horrible things, including terrorism.
Totally disagree. You couldn't be more wrong.
Okay. So do we need to go to the Supreme Court case?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's all tied together, right? But
yeah.
Sure. All right. So I mean, you're rarely wronger than you are here. So
then why have I heard that sentence so much in my life?
So the Supreme Court, the two cases the Supreme Court ruled on were shitty cases. They were argued poorly. They were poorly conceived. Everyone who listened to the arguments, and I listened to most of them, which was grueling in and of itself, believed, whatever side of Section 230 you were on, that these two cases were going to fail on their merits. And so,
which I will just briefly explain what they were. One was filing suit because Twitter was platforming. Was the Twitter the one with terrorists, or was Google the one, YouTube the one with terrorists?
Yeah.
But in any case, they were platforming dangerous content. Bad things happened, and in one case, they claimed that simply platforming the dangerous content made the platform accessories before the fact to harm. And the other one said that because the YouTube one said that because YouTube was promoting the dangerous content, it lost its protection under Section 230 because it was becoming an active publisher by recommending dangerous shit and not just a neutral platform. And in both cases, the court, or in opinions from Clarence Thomas, said that no, a platform is no more culpable for harm based on stuff that it provides than a cell phone company is culpable if a conspiracy is hatched on the phone. And which was a blow to those who think that Section 230 needs to be dismantled. It seems like the Supreme Court has put a stake in the ground that says you're not easily going to dismantle this legislation.
So what again, totally disagree. What I read was far more kind of wishy-washy than that. But net, the Democrats, the Republicans, and the president, maybe the only thing that they at least publicly agree on, which is that Section 230 needs to be rewritten or dismantled. So presuming they can get out of their own fucking way and just push the button and then put a law in place, all of this, parents are upset. We have to blah, blah, blah. We have to do something about big tech. Okay, we're doing something. Here's the thing. We're going to remove this law. So then someone has to actually make the case to the Supreme Court that says the rewritten Section 230, which no longer exists, is that Congress didn't have the right to disassemble this law that was written 26 years ago. That needs a case. It needs an injured third parties, which would have to be the platform. I mean, who would sue and get to the Supreme Court to get the Congress and both Democrats and Republicans overruled by the Supreme Court, who would that be? Like Facebook would sue? No, probably. They need an injured plaintiff. I don't know. I think Section 230's kind of like overarching get out of jail free card is the thing that all the platforms are now collectively hiding behind. So,
well, that's true. But all I'm suggesting is that Clarence Thomas and the rest of the court, what I believe was a unanimous ruling, protected 230 for the time being. The Congress is certainly capable of passing a law that, in effect, replaces 230 with other legislation, and which would be subject to all the legal challenges that any new legislation is subject to. So if the law no longer exists because it's been repealed and replaced with something else, the Supreme Court ruling is not relevant. Right. So I see what you're pushing back against. I was not suggesting that Section 230 is here to stay and we're stuck with it forever. I'm simply saying that in its current form, it's been protected. And the idea that new legislation is going to replace it is itself a bit far-fetched, considering the state of politics in America. Nobody's going to act for fear that it will be used as a political wedge by the opposition. Right?
Well, and part of why going after TikTok is expedient is because, you know, Facebook has the largest contingent of lobbyists on the face of the earth, you know, basically living up and down K Street and having endless number of lunches and dinners with, you know, again, it comes down to the staffers, right? So like they're working over the staffers. I mean, it's not like the people that are, you know, was at the AI hearing last week, you know, at the Senate have any idea what they're talking about. I mean, they've got 24-year-old staffers saying, you know, here's what's going on with AI. You know, I mean, you know, I have trouble believing that, you know, Blumenthal is, you know, well, I don't know, maybe they're all playing with, you know, ChatGPT to, you know, write emails for them or something. Dear constituent, thank you for your thoughtful letter about fill in the blank. In any case, I'm increasingly passionate about 230s being used as a shield for bad behavior. That's
so. But I think we've learned that the solution will not
about that. So.
Deliverance will not come from the courts. I mean, that is certainly clear. The Supreme Court has lined up now unanimously to protect the status quo. So the solution will have to come with new legislation. And the question is, what will that legislation look like? Can it possibly get through both houses of Congress? And then will the president sign it? Those are all sort of notional. And by the way, nobody's really come up with a good idea for regulating the platforms that isn't an obvious violation of the First Amendment. So that's why I think the status quo is going to prevail for some good while.
So Biden talked about 230 in the State of the Union. I don't think re-regulating the platforms is the answer. I think simply taking away their blanket shield. And I get it. It will make the world messy. It'll mean there'll be lots of litigation. Lawyers will do really well. But you know what? Net, no single platform is going to behave better until they're all on a, quote, level playing field in which they're faced with the same potential risks of their economic well-being. Anyway, suffice it to say, I think part of why I wanted to have this discussion / argument is I think the media's kind of blanket take was that the Supreme Court somehow protected 230. People seem to have forgotten how shitty the actual cases were. They just agreed not to disassemble it based on what was put in front of them. So I'm still optimistic that there's change in the horizon and not the distant horizon.
Well, we're back to the great pumpkin, aren't we?
Well, no. On June 5th, we're going to have headsets. and until then,
well, I hope the reality that we see is a pleasant one for you. But I just want to remind you, it's virtual.
anytime you want to FedEx me your unused Apple Watch, I'm happy to wear it on the pod and show it off. And then when you fall, you could text me and say, could you click my watch for me?
And if I had my phone, I would, but it's in the other room.
Have a good week. See you, Bob.